Well, according to my clock, it's noon, so we will go ahead and get started. I hope everyone can hear okay. If you are having trouble hearing, you might let us know by putting a message in the chat bar, which is on your, probably on the right-hand side of your screen toward the bottom. There's a place to chat. You should be able to see that. We want to welcome you to the first ever Leap Texas webinar. So you're part of history today, and we're glad that you have joined us. Today we are talking about the interinstitutional assessment, a collaborative that we will be working on to involve institutions in the state in a new project. Want to introduce to you the presenters today. I'm Larry King, and Chris, if you want to advance that slide or give me control. I'm Larry King. I'm from Stephen F. Austin State University. You'll have to be nice to me because we lost to Duke on Sunday, and then we lost our basketball coach yesterday. And we also have with us Chris Duke. Chris is from San Jacinto College. We are the assessment fellows with the Faculty Fellows Project from AAC&U through Leap Texas. So what we want to talk about today is the project that we have outlined to work on. Chris, if you want to advance that slide. If you have questions, I will say this, if you have questions, please send them via the chat window. And you should, again, as I said, find that. Chris, if you want to point out, well, I guess that you may be able to point out where the chat window is for them. It's going to be down toward the bottom on the right-hand side, probably of your screen, in the GoToMeeting control panel there. Also, this presentation will be available on the Leap Texas website, so if you need to refer to it later or if you want to send it to someone, you could do that as well. Also, you will have the ability to continue this conversation at leaptexas.org. Chris, do you want to say a word about that, how they can continue the conversation?
Yeah, we're going to, as the slide notice, we're going to put the presentation, the webinar recording out on the website as a blog post. That link there has kind of the home for the Texas Assessments Collaborative, and so you'll be able to find that post there. And then we're going to be adding an opportunity for you to post comments and questions as about this webinar as a part of a comment to that blog post. And then we're also working to add discussion forums and file sharing as well through the website.
Thank you, Chris. And I think we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. I'm going to give you an overview of the project and what we have envisioned for the project. We have both short-term and long-term goals or visions for the project. Short-term, we would like to see faculty from across the state of Texas in community colleges as well as universities involved in this project. And we would like to assess student work gathered from those institutions using the LEAP value rubrics so that we can get a better understanding of how our students are achieving the Texas core objectives. Those of you who are familiar with the Texas core objectives and the development of the objectives will know that those objectives were based in a large part on the work of AAC&U and the LEAP project. Sort of our midterm vision that we would have would be that faculty will work together in a statewide project of interpreting the LEAP value rubrics and how they are aligned with the Texas core objectives to help us in our assessment of the core objectives and the development of our methods for assessing the core objectives and the way we do that at our local institutions. So we see this as helping us on the state level, but also helping us in our institutions as we go about the work of assessing the core. Then a long-term vision that we have for this is that we would use this project to help us really develop over time our statewide interpretation of how we apply the LEAP value rubrics to the Texas core, and also to help us with our local results and interpreting our local results based on those state results that we would gain from this project. So we believe that it would help us in the long run to better understand how we in the state of Texas are applying those value rubrics, and then also inform us on how our students are performing at our local institution compared to a sample of students across the state. To carry out this project, we are looking for institutions to participate in the project. We would like to start with at least 8 institutions, 4 universities, and 4 community colleges. Now, we say 8, but that does not necessarily mean that that's the absolute number. We're going to start the project, and we're going to work on the project with whatever number that we get. If we get 4, we'll work with 4. We would like 8, and we hope that we can get 8 institutions to participate. And as I said, 4 universities and 4 community colleges. We want to, through this project, collect samples of student work, hopefully about 400 documents of student work that we can assess through the project. We also intend to have sessions where the faculty that will be coding and looking at the student work would be calibrated. We would like to have about 40 evaluators to assess the student documents. And we're going to start with the written communication rubric. We felt that written communication was probably the lowest hanging fruit and probably the easiest to gain and get samples of student work for, and probably one that all of us have already assessed at our institutions. Then we will analyze and evaluate those results, and we'll look at those results and think about what are the next steps and the implications of those results for the future of the project and also even for the core in the state of Texas.
Okay, so with the 3rd annual LEAP Texas Forum back in February and today's webinar, it's really the initial call for institutions to participate in the project. And as Larry mentioned, then we're looking for at least 8 institutions to start, with 4 community colleges and 4 universities. So what I want to do is take some time to kind of describe the work that you'll be doing as a participating institution, so that you'll have an idea of what you're getting into when you agree to participate. And of course, when we get into that call for participation, if your institution's interested in participating, this isn't something that's written in stone. We understand that things change. So if you have an initial interest, then I would say express interest in participating and continue participating through the webinars and the conversations that we have, over the next year. And to inform what you're doing locally and also to inform what we're doing with this project as well. So the initial institutional responsibilities is we have a call for participants, and you see the link there at the bottom of the screen. That is a j.mp and then LEAP Texas-IAP. The first thing that you'll do on that form is that we need to identify a faculty lead and an assessment lead from each institution. And each of those 2 leads will participate in the webinars from this March through October. It'll be about 1 or 2 per month. Right now, we're averaging about 1 a month in the schedule that we've been looking at. The second thing that will be a very significant part of that responsibility is looking at local IRB and institutional approval requirements. With all of our different institutions, we have different types of institutions, both public and private, and we have community colleges and universities. So we all have, some institutions, the universities, of course, have the full IRBs. Some community colleges have informal IRBs, and others don't have an official IRB of any sort. And so we've got to look at what is necessary from an institutional perspective in order to meet those requirements for IRB and institutional approval. We do want to get those details worked out prior to the beginning of the fall semester, and we do have webinars scheduled this spring in terms of working through some of those issues, in terms of providing guidance on what we've learned in our research, both looking at what the multi-state collaborative is doing, and then also looking at locally what we're doing at our local institutions in order to meet those requirements.
Might I say one thing on the IRB issue? We firmly believe that this is an exempt project because of the nature of the project and because of how we were collecting the student work.
No, absolutely. That's appreciate you adding that, Larry. Is that in part of the guidance around IRB and will be in terms of some of the language that we've used locally in order to get through that process. The third thing that we'll be doing is we will be collecting and submitting a sample of 75 to 100 student documents that meet the sampling requirements. And we'll get into those details a little bit today, but certainly in much more detail over the next 6 months. Once we get around to next spring, we'll be looking for 3 to 5 evaluators, and that can include the faculty lead and the assessment lead, to attend interinstitutional assessment activities at the February 2017 LEAP Texas Forum. We're anticipating doing calibration sessions and maybe the full assessment session as well next February. And so we would be looking for the assessment lead, the faculty lead, and then an additional 1 to 3 faculty from their institution participating in that process next spring. And then finally, once we get through the assessment process, then all the individuals that participate, we'll be asking them to participate in follow-up surveys and webinars in order to kind of help us evaluate the project and then to identify steps for future action, because one of the primary goals of this project is that we lay a foundation for ongoing and continued interinstitutional assessment within the state as part of LEAP Texas's activities. Again, that link is there, and then this presentation and all the information is available, will be available from the LEAP Texas website, and then we'll be sending out the call for participation again through the LEAP Texas listserv as soon as this is over. So again, that first step on that call for participation is that you'll need to institutionally identify a faculty lead that represents and provides faculty interest. If you have an assessment lead at your institution, and then the faculty evaluators, those can be kind of determined later if needed. I know that whenever I completed the form for our participation, we indicated at San Jack our faculty lead, our assessment lead, but I left the faculty evaluators to be determined because I'll be identifying those folks this fall. But you will want to keep in mind that you'll need to be working to identify those folks and maybe start bringing some of those folks into the webinars this spring as well. The other person that we asked that be identified on that call is the Chief Academic Officer that is kind of signing off on approval for this project, just as a liaison and as a contact point for the presentation or for the project. So the faculty lead and assessment lead, we at least want those 2 individuals ideally participating in the webinars throughout the spring and summer. This was kind of the first presentation, so I think we have some folks online that have already completed the call for participation and are participating in this webinar. The next one will be next week on March 29th, and we'll be looking at assignment design and selection. And then one side note is that we understand that we're trying to focus on this project from one perspective, that we want to facilitate and do what we need to do in order to make this project work. But the other thing that we're doing as we're developing these presentations is that we're working to incorporate things into the presentations that are useful to all institutions within the state, so that all of our LEAP Texas members or prospective LEAP Texas member institutions, even those institutions that have not yet started LEAP-based type of assessment at their institutions, these webinars are ideally designed to provide insight from the institutions that have been engaging in that type of assessment, so that it's, no matter where your institution may be in that process, that we're hoping and trying to design the webinars so that you'll get useful information out of them. The other two remaining webinars that are already scheduled are April 5th. We'll be looking at sampling plans. And again, we'll be taking kind of two approaches or two topics of conversation within that. One is how we want to sample for this project, but then also we'll talk about just sampling practices in general when you're looking at LEAP-based type of assessment within your institution. The last one that we currently have on the schedule is April 26th, and we'll be looking at IRB and institutional approval on April 26th. Now, a quick note on sampling plans, and this is kind of an example of what we'll be talking about, a sneak peek. In our conversations thus far around this project, when we're talking about collecting samples of student work from multiple institutions on assignments looking at written communication, the first kind of the requirement we're looking for is that the assignments would be appropriate for the value written communication rubric. Currently, we're looking at maybe 750 plus words, and it requires the use of evidence so that it's not, just a self-reflecting journal entry of some sort. And because that type of requirement ensures that the students have been asked to perform in a way that the rubric expects so that we can validly assess it. Second, we're looking at institutions when we collect the work, is that we're looking at work from students that have 75 to 100% core complete and or have completed 42 to 72 completed semester credit hours. One of the things that we're trying to target is we want the kind of the population to be comparable between the two. And we understand that there may be some conversations about all of these requirements as we go, because we've already had some conversations around, how possible is it going to be to find students at a university that are 75 to 100% core complete that don't have more than 72 completed semester credit hours, because students in a university sometimes string the core out all the way through their last semester. And so these conversations, these are kind of our initial thoughts. Please understand that those participating institutions, as we participate in the webinars, there'll be room for conversation and discussion, both through the webinars and through the LEAP Texas website, in terms of exactly how we want to manage the project. We are approaching it very much as a collaborative project. Larry and I, our responsibility is to do a kind of a lot of groundwork and initial work and bring back the initial ideas and say, kind of, all right, here's a starting point. Where do we go from here? And that's where collaboratively within the interinstitutional assessment project, all the participating institutions kind of shape that moving forward. The last two requirements you see there, that we're looking at no more than 10 from a single course or single faculty member, and ideally no more than 1 from an individual student. And then we're also looking at making sure that we're providing as much support as possible on, how to do and how to collect these documents, because I know that from our perspective, at least at San Jacinto College, that we'd be able to provide insight to other institutions that are perhaps working with, with Banner and with Blackboard and possibly Blackboard Outcomes, because those are the systems that we work with. So I kind of anticipate those types of conversations happening between institutions as well as we work through this process. Now, the institutional responsibilities for this project, shifting back away from kind of the faculty lead and the assessment lead, including also the chief academic officer. I mentioned earlier the institutional or IRB approval. We do want to have those in place, and as Larry mentioned, we do expect fully expect this to be an exempt project, and a lot of the language that we've already seen, and then also the language that we've developed at San Jac internally for our local informal IRB is taking that route. And so we'll be providing that information and support where needed. One of the things that we're also looking to do with this project is really kind of emphasize the assessment collaboratives, the faculty collaboratives project that has a home at leaptexas.org, and really kind of creating that as a base for all of the collaborative projects, including this Texas Assessment Collaborative and the interinstitutional assessment. And so one of the things that we may be looking to do is also for those institutions that are participating, and you've seen a little bit of this, those of you that have already responded to that call for participation, we asked about what are your current experiences with assessing using kind of the LEAP-based approach. We may want to be developing kind of institutional profiles at Leap Texas, kind of as a case study, and it would kind of mirror what the AAC&U has done with their case studies. That would provide for institutions that are visiting Leap Texas as an information source. What they'll find then is they'll find these institutional profiles of this is how San Jacinto College is using LEAP-based assessment. This is how Stephen F. Austin is using LEAP-based assessment. And it provides additional resource on that site for visiting institutions. Once we get into the fall, the faculty lead and the assessment lead will coordinate the collection and preparation of the local samples. And once we get to September, we'll talk about and focus on collecting and preparing student work, because as Larry mentioned, the way we're going to collect the documents and how we're going to prepare them has an influence on the IRB process. And so we'll be talking in September about the collection and preparing of student work. Chief among those is that all of the work will need to be completely de-identified by student, no faculty information, no institutional information, so that when we get to the point of assessing, that an evaluator has no idea even from which institution the sample was taken, much less from which faculty or which student. When we get into October, we'll start looking at what's necessary for the submission of samples to the online system. And then October through December, we'll actually be having all of the samples collected after they've been prepared and stuff. They'll be submitted to the online system in advance of the February, and I think that's probably the next slide, and it is, all the evaluators that participate in the calibration and training sessions to prepare for the assessment and then assess the student documents. And that'll begin in February at the LEAP Forum pre-conference workshops. There's already been preliminary conversations about having at least a calibration session at that LEAP Forum. And then we may also be assessing student work in live text at that time. We're still kind of assessing that. If we're not able to do the entire evaluation session during the span of the conference, then in February to March, then evaluators would complete the online assessment of assigned documents. Some of that's still in flux. We're still a good, 8, 9, 10 months out from that, I guess 11 months out from that. And so we're kind of looking at the logistics around that still. And then as I mentioned earlier, once we get the assessment done, then we'll also be asking for those that participated, especially our evaluators, to complete a survey of evaluators that will give us insight into their experience with the online system, with what they saw with the student assignments, where they designed well or they intended well, or did they feel like that they were assessing the written communication skills validly enough using the rubric given the assignments that were submitted. And all of that is to provide, again, information and knowledge moving forward, because with this first project primarily serving as a way to build a foundation for ongoing and continued interinstitutional assessment throughout the state. We may be looking at next April. In addition to that survey, we'll have a webinar around the data results and then how they could or should not be used. And then online discussions in April and May to kind of wrap up this first year of this project. Now, the other thing that we are doing is, everything that I just talked about was a call for participation by institutions, and we absolutely have to have that level of participation. And because that's kind of the core of it, we have to be able to go through that process institutionally with those 8 institutions in order to get those samples of student work. But we also expect that there will be members of our faculty statewide that have interest in participating in the project, even though their institution may not be participating. So one of the things that we're entertaining currently, and we're going to have to wait to see how this pans out over the next year, is that in order to make that workload for evaluators more manageable next spring at the LEAP Texas Forum, and to further divide up that workload, what we're looking at doing is having opportunity for individuals that want to participate as evaluators from institutions that aren't participating. So we also do have a call for individual participants. And again, this isn't something that is going to go away anytime soon. It may be, into the summer or next fall before individuals know whether or not their institution is participating or not, and then to make that decision individually to participate. So that link will remain available for quite some time. And once you've had those conversations locally with your institution, and you realize maybe that your institution's not going to participate, but that you would still like to, then that link there at j.mp/LEAP-Texas and Texas Collaborative is available for you to indicate that you'd like to participate as an evaluator. Now, the requirements and expectations for individuals will be that you'll attend the Texas Assessment Collaborative activities at the 2017 LEAP Texas Forum that I've already been talking about, and that you'll assess 30 to 40 student documents against the value written communication rubric. And again, the reason why we're entertaining the idea of having faculty participate from LEAP Texas institutions is that would drive that number down, that 30 to 40 down a little bit, so that it's not as much work, because we understand that this is kind of a voluntary participation. It's an additional workload. And so we're looking at doing 2 things. One, distributing that workload, but then also allowing for as broad a participation as possible across all LEAP Texas institutions, whether they're participating institutionally or not. Individuals would be expected and asked to participate in those follow-up surveys and webinars just like other participants as well. There was a note on the previous slide, and it's also noted here at the bottom, is that again, we're looking at ways for the possibility of individuals participating as evaluators. But right now it's not a certainty, so participation is not yet guaranteed, but certainly if you have interest, then that link is there and available.
You may be asking the question, well, what's in it for me or for my institution if we participate in this whole project? Well, let's look at some answers to that, hopefully. We hope that by participating in the project, folks will benefit from contributing to this statewide project, and there will be some great benefits to both community colleges and universities. We hope that by participating in the project, folks will gain some experience using those LEAP value rubrics if they have not used them before, or even if they have used them before, gain some additional experience, and maybe experience that would be different than at just their institution, but looking at work from students across the state. Also, we hope that this project will help us get a idea of the statewide performance of students on our Texas core objectives that have been identified for us. We also hope that this project will help us to develop a statewide interpretation of the value rubrics, so that as a state we can say this value rubric, we're applying it in this way, and this is what those terms in that rubric mean. Also, we hope that for those folks that are leaders in assessment in the state of Texas, this will help us to improve and sustain our local methods for assessment of the core. Many of us across the state are struggling at points on exactly how do we assess this objective, what's the best way to assess this objective, what's the most effective way. Hopefully this project will help us hammer out some of those things across the state. We also hope that this project will help us to, in our local institutions, as assessment leaders, advance the assessment of the core objectives at our local institutions. It will give us an opportunity to hone our skills, to see what other institutions are doing, and then we can bring those lessons back to our local institutions and apply those at our local institutions. We hope also that this project will help us to bring the LEAP value rubrics into local institutions. Maybe your institution already uses them, but there are many institutions in the state that are not using the LEAP value rubrics. We feel that they're a valuable resource and tool for assessment of the core, so we hope that this project will help us to bring the use of the LEAP value rubrics throughout the state. Also, one goal that we have kind of in our mind is that through this project we may be able to start developing some discussion of benchmarks for the state of Texas, how we would expect our students to perform on these objectives using the value rubrics. That will in turn, of course, help us at our local institutions to compare our local performance on those rubrics with the statewide performance on those rubrics. We also hope that this project for our institutions will be able to help us to develop a statewide context for the alignment of assessment of our core objectives. So our institutions across the state could begin to see how other institutions are assessing, what we're doing in assessment, and hopefully each of those institutions throughout the state then would begin to move in directions that would support each other. We also hope that this whole project will help to support and inform our local methods and practices with the alignment of the LEAP value rubrics in 2-year and 4-year institutions. We hope that we would be using the same sort of methods for assessment and having the same sort of understandings of student performance across the 2-year and 4-year institutions. We also hope that this project will help us to develop a statewide context for local discussions regarding whether or not and how our students attain the general education outcomes that have been identified for us.
All right, so the next steps would be to, if you haven't already, to have those local conversations as an institution to determine the level of interest in participating institutionally. The first step then, once you've made that decision, is to complete that call for institutional participation. It's available at that link, the j.mp leaptexas-iap. And then, of course, as you do that, you'll have to identify the institutional context, that faculty lead and that assessment lead. And then we're going to be sending out, we checked this morning to look, we've got, I think, 5 institutions that have already completed that call for institutional participation in the last month since we initially made that call at the 3rd Annual LEAP Texas Forum. We'll be sending out communications to those folks over the next week in advance of next week's webinar. The other thing that you may be interested in is also that call for individual faculty participation. As you have those conversations locally, if your institution decides not to participate but is a member of LEAP Texas and you would like to participate as an individual, then there's also that call for individual faculty participation as well. So question and answers. Before we get into the question and answers, what we're going to be doing is we're going to make this presentation available through the LEAP Texas website. And then we'll start capturing some of the questions and answers at that website within the Texas Assessment Collaborative section of the Faculty Collaboratives portion of the LEAP Texas website. And we'll start putting those there.